But here to guide the practitioners on how to apply that mixture in the business, because it cannot be subjective. Number one, it cannot be left to the officer to determine the permissibility or otherwise. And here the role of the some regulator, like for example, the Security Commissions came up with the index screening of the stock to determine what is the acceptable ratio, since the mixtures of the business is allowed, but we want to put a threshold, you know, to minimize the penetrations of the haram in the portfolio, and not to open it, because the mixer of the haram could be 10% halal and 90% haram. So we want to monitor that. We try to minimize the haram mixtures portfolio as much as we can, especially within this context of very complex business environments that the Islamic financing is operating within. And here the first one is the 5% benchmarking, which is related to the following activities. So meaning that the financial institutions cannot earn in its mixed portfolio more than 5% from the following activities: conventional banking, conventional insurance, gambling, liquor and liquor related activities, pork and pork related activities, non-halal food and beverages, sharia, non-compliance, entertainments, interest income from conventional accounts and instruments, tobacco and tobacco related activities, and all activities deemed non-compliance according to the Sharia. So this kind of activities, if you are involved in such kind of a mixed activities, your core business is Sharia compliant, your core business is Sharia compliance, your core business doesn't fall into riba, into gambling, into maisir, into prohibited product and services, your core business is clean. But subsidiary activities may involve some non-Sharia compliance activities due to that kind of sometimes constrained environments and activities that the institutions or the corporation may get involved. You may have a company which has transportation, like for example airlines, which is Sharia compliance activities, but their placement, for example, it could be with the conventional bank. So they may get some kind of return from that placement with the conventional bank. So that placement cannot exceed the 5%. And the list goes like this. So this kind of threshold should be monitored in order to ensure that your activities is below the threshold, that you are minimizing the haram in your business activity as much as you can within this ratio. The other threshold mentioned by the Security Commission is 20%, which will be applicable to share trading and stock broking business, rental receiver from Sharia non-compliance activities, and activities which you deem non-compliant with Sharia. So here we are talking about other activities like share trading and rental from non-Sharia compliance activity. So it shouldn't exceed your 20%. You may have a mixed company portfolio. You could be declared as Sharia compliance, or you may finance if you wish to so, but you have to monitor the threshold to make sure that the business mixed activity doesn't cross this 20%. The other basically threshold that could be used and added is the financial ratio. Here, number one, cash over total asset. Cash normally will include cash placed in a conventional accounts and instruments. So whatever cash placements in the conventional, and the cash placed in Islamic basically bank will be excluded. So if you have a cash in a conventional bank, it will be calculated. If you have a cash with an Islamic bank, it will be excluded from the calculation. Here we have a cash over the total asset, you shouldn't exceed 33%. Now when it comes to the debt over the asset also shouldn't exceed the 30%. And debt, here we are talking about the debt loans which are obtained by the conventional banks. Of course, the Islamic banks facilities will be excluded. And as a result of that, your loans, your total debts from the conventional banks divided by the total asset, you shouldn't exceed 33%. So again, if you have a cash placement with the conventional bank divided by the total asset, you shouldn't exceed 33%. If you have loan obtained from the financial institution divided by the total asset, you cannot exceed 33%. So with this, you will monitor your threshold, you will monitor your basically what's so-called gearing ratio. You will be maintaining within some kind of Sharia requirements. And of course, this is based on ijtihad. There are different index providers that may have a little bit variation on the threshold and the screening methodology, but overall this is ijtihad, and the idea is that the mixed portfolio activities is allowed by the person, meaning it is allowed by Sharia to deal with a person who has a mixed activities. But here we are talking about trying to monitor this business activity, trying to putting a minimum what so-called levels of that kind of prohibitions in order to create kind of standards in order to measure those prohibitions, so to allow basically the financial institutions to deal with these institutions, to allow the Islamic financial institution to invest in those portfolios. Because if you don't have that kind of measurements, if you don't have this kind of threshold, you don't have consistency, you don't have standardizations, then basically you cannot monitor the level of haram within the portfolio, and it may increase over the time, and it may reach 90%. So 90% still mixed, and ambiguity may take place. So those standards, those screening stock methodology are very useful, very important to create standardization, to create measurements, to enable to monitor those thresholds and monitor the level of the haram within the operation of the mixer entity. And as a result of the law, it will help the financial institutions to make decisions when it comes to the investment, because they have this kind of measurements. And of course, in Islamic banking, we don't have the same threshold and measurements to grant financing, but still, normally the Islamic banking are referring to those benchmarks, and based on that, they will be guided to customize, to further customize and enhance their threshold in order to grant financing to the different entity which has a mixed business portfolio activities. With that, thank you very much, and see you inshallah in the coming sessions. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.